add in something here.
You mean this Saturday?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This coming Saturday.
There's nothing here.
Right.
So,
It will be due this Saturday, so we'll talk about it here. Let's see here. All right. Capture, turn that off. All right, so I want to talk about APIs. What can you guys tell me about APIs?
API stands for Application Programming Interface.
Okay, Application Program Interface. Now with Application Program Interface, what are some of the different APIs that exist out there with us today?
Like we have,
And what would you do with it? Go ahead.
so we have like Google API.
Okay, what are some of the Google APIs? Because that's actually one of the ones we're going to use. We're going to actually use Google Maps.
Map, geolocation.
So we're going to use Google Maps API for this project, and then I want to show you another one that we can use as well. What are some other APIs that are available to us that we could use? All right, if you ever go into a website and it says sign on, and then it says you can sign on with Facebook or Google or create your own, right? You understand? So this is an API as well. This is an API that gives you control of the security of your website, all right? And you go out and you research, how does the sign-on for Facebook work? How does the sign-on for Google work? If you create your own, then the accountability is on you, all right? There's other ones out there for like Twitter, Facebook, just general ones. Other ones out there for Instagram. There's APIs for weather. There's APIs for movies. Pretty much any of your big websites that you can think of, there's going to be some kind of an API that enables you to be able to tie into them. So the application program interface gives you the ability to take an existing service, tap into their data in some way, and then present it yourself however you would like to present it. All right? So in the case of these guys over here, you understand the sign-in API. That's a specific API. And when you choose Facebook or Google, this is the trade-off that happens. If you choose to let them handle all of your authentication to your website, you're trading your users' information and data to Google or Facebook. That's how it works.
So does it include like important credentials? Even if if for example I have like a bank account and I decide to authenticate Facebook with my bank account, is it going to have all my credentials, and are they able to access my bank account?
So the bank account's a bad example because there's regulations in place that state that banks can't share any of that financial information. But you got the right thought, okay? Let's say that we have a shopping website and we choose Google or Facebook as our authentication method. They might say, that's fine, as long as you're not hitting our service more than 150 times an hour. All we want to know is what their name is, what time of day they're hitting your website. But if you start exceeding that number of hits per hour, well, we want some more information. Maybe we want to know what websites, or I'm sorry, what pages within your website they're hitting. What are they buying? right? What are they looking at? Where are they coming from? What other information can we gather from them? Okay? So that's where it comes from, and that's how they get their information. Then when we come over here to like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, well, these guys, they have APIs as well. Maybe we want to do something like analyze users' tweets. Maybe we want to analyze Facebook. Maybe we want to analyze Instagram. Maybe we want to pull something about what our users are saying about our website and stream it straight to our website. So that's where the APIs come into play. So it looks at our Facebook page and then posts whatever the latest comments are. That's the API. It is really easy, actually. There's a variety of ways that most of these sites will allow you to grab that information. Sometimes, and one of them we'll see here in a minute through the IP API, you can do a serialized PHP array. Sometimes you can have a JSON message sent. Sometimes it can be an XML structure, all right? Somehow that data pool has got to come over to our stuff. So that could be in the form of JSON, that could be an XML, that could be a serialized array of some sort. And then that gets pulled into our stuff. So again, with this example, what are our users posting on social media, right? What are they posting? And we want to present that proudly on our website. So we make a call to the service and we say, what is the latest information that's up there? And we can do this anywhere from once a minute to hundreds of times a minute, depending on what the threshold of the number of calls you're allowed to make to the API. And they all have that. It's documented. You're only allowed to make 150 calls per minute to the API. Any more than that, we want money. That's usually what it comes down to. Right? Now 150 a minute, that's fine for us, for development. But you got to think about that when you start getting into, a large website. If I'm going to be making something that's big for thousands of people to use, how many calls am I going to be making on that API? How much is it going to cost me? Now they charge fractions of a cent on the calls after so many. It's like 1/1000th of a cent per call. But if you start having 30,000 calls per minute and 40,000 calls per minute, it starts adding up. So then we pull that data. It will be sent to us however we choose, according to what the documentation is. It might be an XML structure. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. JSON, JavaScript, messaging, can't even remember the acronym, or a serialized array, depending on what you're using, right? And there might be some other ways that it can communicate with you. We can do the same thing with weather. We can do it with movies. Weather is pretty easy. We can pull out, we can feed it something like a zip code. Call with the zip code 21532. What comes back at me is a XML structure giving me everything from temp, high, low, forecast, daily, forecast hourly. Does that make sense? Movies could be the same thing. We make a call with, again, either a movie or a zip code. If we did a zip code, that would state that we want to know what the theater times are, maybe. If we did it, and it depends on that documentation. If you feed it a zip code, I'm going to send back to you a structure containing theaters and times of movies. If you send to me a movie name, I'm going to send you just movie times, show times for that movie, or the release date. right? So I make a call, 21532, that's Frostburg zip code, return to me theaters in, say, 30-mile radius with movies and times. Right? So that's the general idea with APIs. And here's the thing, we don't use them enough in undergraduate and graduate. So I want you to do a very basic setup of an API and do something with it. That's what you're going to do for this upcoming week. You can use the existing LAMP architecture that you already have set up, LAMP, WAMP, whatever you have set up. So you got this WAMP environment set up with PHP, MySQL, and everything. And now you're going to tap into an API. All right? So let's have a look at IP API real quick. And I'm going to kind of give you a crash course about what all this does.
So can I?
Yep, go for it.
My computer, for some reason, I'm having issues with virtualization because of my CPU.
Okay, so just come in and use these. You can come in and use these computers because you're local, right?
Yes, sir.
So anytime you need the virtualization, you can use it. I don't care about the virtualization this time around. If you want to set up the, you have a Windows machine, right?
Yes, sir.
So you can set up the XAMPP on your machine and go from there.
Oh,
You can just do it local on your machine. I don't care about the virtualization this time. First time was about virtualization. Now I don't care.
that was one part of the reason that slowed me down.
Sure. Yep, I get it. All right. Can you guys see me? You can't see my screen, right? Let's see here. Let me screen up for you. And as soon as I find my glasses, explain to you what's going on. All right. So this is the IP API. And if you come under developers, and you'll have to do this for everything, right? So if you want to do Google Maps, which is what you're going to want to do, Google Maps API documentation. The first thing you want to go to is you really want to read the documentation. You know, what's the general stuff? You know, what's a key? How do I get the key? How am I going to get the message passed to me? So with the IP API, we can come in here and we can look at some of the different ways in which information could be sent to us. So here's some of the documentation. We come in here and it'll start telling us about how we can pass information and what information is going to be coming into us. All right. So I want to show you let me see here, where am I at? I want to show you an implementation of this. So if we go here, this is using PHP, and you really want to pay attention if you're going to do the IP API. You want to make sure that your browse cap.ini is up to date on your server.
That's for the IP API.
That's for pretty much any of them. All right. And the reason you want to do that is we can grab a ton of information off of any user if we have the browse cap up to date. So here it is. Here's the IP API in action. So when you hit my server from an external, from anybody, from anywhere you're at, except for here, it doesn't work too well. I could do some adjustment and get it. It's going to tell me all of this information. This is what it returns. I simply asked it, what was my IP address? Well, actually, I fed it the IP address. And from the IP address, I can get all of this different information. I can get, well, when I grab this with my PhD, I can get what version of Chrome I'm using, what the platform is that I'm using. Is it a desktop or a laptop, or is it an iOS? Is it an Android device? It'll even drill down to it's an iPhone or an iPad. And there's even information in there. There's a bigger version of this browse cap that it'll go all the way down to tell you what type of Android device it is. Is it a Samsung? Yeah. Is it a Galaxy? Yeah. Is it a Galaxy 6, 7, 8, 9? All the way down. Even if you want, and it's a really big version of this, it'll even tell you what the screen size is. Okay? All from simply going to a website. There's nothing special going on here. I go to a website, and this is information that's constantly broadcast. All right? I can grab your IP address. Once I grab your IP address, then I can send it off to IP API. So I sent it my IP address, which I got from my PHP code. And then it sends back to me the following information. All right? And this is that serialized array that I got from IP API. It tells me city, the longitude, the ISP, Atlantic Broadband, where the query came from. That's the IP address. What country, what state, again, the country again, the zip code, there's the latitude, so on and so forth. That's just from grabbing the user's IP address that they made the call from, and then feeding it to IP API. Now, I don't know how much you've been paying attention to what's going on in the United States as far as internet service providers go. But recently the FCC ruled that the ISPs are unregulated, meaning they can collect whatever they collect on you when you use their service, they can do with whatever they want. They could turn around and sell that to somebody or whatever they want to do. So, you guys at home, you have like Comcast or something, right?
Yes,
All right. So you have to pay Comcast, right? So since you're paying Comcast for your internet, they have your name or the person's account name and the address of the IP address. So your IP address is geographically locked at any given time to a specific address. And there's a database built of that, right? So when I look at this, it's going to give me a general, you're in Cumberland. But now that the ISPs can sell information, they can sell it all the way down to the physical address of the call that's being made from a particular IP address at any given time. Does that make sense? So there's databases exist. This is free, but there's databases exist that if you're with a specific or a particular ISP, you can find out exactly where a user is located physically based on their IP address. Kind of cool?
Yes.
Kind of cool, kind of scary at the same time.
Yes, I want to say something. I think last year I downloaded a movie.
Okay.
So I was not even done with, I was halfway done. So I got a message like copyright infringement.
Yeah.
So pretty much I got the application I was using, I got the IP address, I got my device, I got my name, and I got everything about me. And this was not Comcast doing like the monitoring.
Right.
It was like the people who has the money.
Yeah, that's the NPAA. Yeah. Go ahead, keep on going.
And they reported me to Comcast, and
Yeah.
Comcast had to like send me a message that I should shut down whatever I'm doing.
Absolutely.
Is that like information sharing?
So what that is an agreement set up between the RIAA and the NPAA. The RIAA is the Recording Industry Association of America, and NPAA is the Movie Production maybe Association of America, right? and combat IP infringement, intellectual property infringement. The ISPs have agreed to share very specific instances of copyright infringement with their database. So that's how they got your name. Your name's on the ISP. MPAA, in this case, said, hey, I got an IP address, it's the Comcast IP address. Here's the IP address, here's the time. Who was using that IP address at that time? Comcast says this is it. MPAA looks at it, verifies that the movie you're downloading is an illegal download, contacts Comcast and says this user at this time is doing this, please send a cease and desist and give them a strike against their account. That's exactly how it was done.
That's what I got.
That's exactly how it was done. Kind of scary, isn't it?
How old and now so scared.
It's kind of scary, frightening. So, what you're going to do is you can play with this IP API in the beginning. It's just a nice way to get your feet wet with an API if you've never used an API. It's well documented. If you want to jump right into the Google API, that's perfectly fine as well. Okay? But what I want you to do at the very least is I want you to figure out how to grab the user's IP address like this. And then I just want you to take a Google map and use the Google API and put a pin in the zip code of the user based on the IP address. Does that make sense? And I pretty much have that ready to go. It's just I wanted to tweak it a little bit, and then I wanted to talk about it today in class and then put the video up with it as well. But it's pretty well good to go.
So how do I access your recorded video on YouTube?
I have to make them public, and I'll make this one public. I'll put it up there. I'll make it public for you. Sound good? So, to recap here, while you guys are here, this is what needs to happen. So using the LAMP/WAMP architecture. So with PHP and other calls. Capture the user's IP address. And that can be using PHP or JavaScript. There is a call built into PHP, and there's some JavaScript out there that will help you to be able to capture that IP address. All right? Once you've captured the IP address, send IP address to IP API and display user information. Right? So that is, the information is kind of like what's listed there. The ISP, state, city, whatever else. Then integrate. So this would be the first thing you want to do. You want to capture that and display it. Make sure you're capturing it. 2, you want to send that off to IP API and figure that out. 3rd, you want to integrate Google API, I'm sorry, Google Maps API, and pin the city based on zip code on a map, zoomed in so like you can see the city. So IP, API, and Google Maps. A couple of different key things here. Browser cap. You may need to be creative with IP address acquisition. And this is why you have to be creative with IP address acquisition. You're going to be developing in the same network. And you're going to be hitting your server in the same network. Does that make sense? You're going to be testing and your server is in the same network. That sometimes creates a little bit of havoc with the PHP or the JavaScript and grabbing the IP address. When the server and the client are in the same network. So you got to find a way to get your external IP address.
So is this like, okay, I'm using like a virtualization?
No, you don't have to use virtualization. You can use XAMPP. You can set up a LAN point architecture. Did you have one set up on your computer?
Yes, sir.
Yep, you're good to go. So you're going to take all the knowledge you had last week and just take it one step further. So this week, we're focused on APIs. This week, we're focused on how do I grab that info. Oh, by the way, when you grab this, for store to database. And finally, this is the start. This is just something for you to think about of analytics. Think Google Analytics. All right, this is the start of it. If we're grabbing IP addresses, which gives us zip code, which gives us geographic location, and platform, what version they're using, what device they're using, that's the start of analytics. I don't want you to actually make analytics, but you need to start thinking about it. If you have time, you should start looking at Google Analytics. If you have a bigger website, you should put some Google Analytics tags on it and start playing with it. Because what it then does is take this stuff that we're storing to a database and it starts putting a dashboard on it. It puts visualization on it. So now you're capable of seeing with your users, okay, here they come in and here's where they drop off in the process. They never get to the checkout. So it enables you as a developer to go in and say, well, why are they dropping off here? Why aren't they completing to checkout? I'm losing sales, and this is why. So you go in then with usability and analyze that page that they keep dropping off and see, is there a usability problem, right? If there's a usability problem, we can fix it, and then maybe we can increase people through to checkout. It can do other stuff for us. The analytics can. Imagine this. Your IP address, and you could do this on your own, your IP address, freely given. Every single user out there, right? IP address is given. That gives me a geographic location. If I'm selling widgets, and I'm targeting a specific region, and I'm doing marketing in that region, but all of a sudden, I have analytics that shows that there's a whole bunch of hits coming from New York. A whole bunch of people from New York have discovered my widgets. But I'm not doing any marketing where this is coming from. Without analytics, I don't even know people from New York are looking at it, but now I know they're looking at it, and it's coming from, I don't know, the Bronx. Well, gee, maybe I should start spending a little bit of money in advertisement in the Bronx, in New York, so I can sell widgets there too. That's what analytics starts doing for us. That's the basics. That's the basics. I can start analyzing how many people are using a laptop versus a desktop versus an Apple versus an Android. And there's a lot of studies out there that show us the type of personality that uses an Android device versus an Apple device, and even the ages that are associated. Google Analytics will go as far, when you have enough users hit your website, it'll go as far as guessing the average age of your users. So if you're trying to target 18 to 25-year-olds, but you're actually drawing in 25 to 35-year-olds, maybe you need to adjust your business plan. You see what I'm saying? It'll start giving you that insight. Now you need to remember, with all of this analytics, this web analytics, it doesn't do us any good without human eyes on it to interpret what's going on. If you don't have human eyes on those dashboards interpreting what's going on, it's pointless. If you follow that data blindly, you're going to set yourself up for failure. So always keep that in mind as you start embracing analytics. But up to this point in time, this is kind of my introduction to analytics. This is, hey, this is how it's done. You're actually developing basic analytics with this. You okay, buddy? Yeah.
Are you learning something?
It's probably Minecraft. Not Minecraft? No. No, I was wrong.
He's listening.
Slither.io? Dragon World?
Dragon.
What is it? Dragon what? Dragon something.
Dragon Village.
Dragon Village. Gotcha.
Kids are just fine.
He doesn't like when I say things wrong. So this is, again, this is the basics of data analytics. This is where it comes from. And if you can begin to understand and piece together conceptually what's going on by doing it yourself and using the APIs to do that, now when you get to using some of these bigger ones, it makes a lot more sense. It'll even help you analyze the flow of your website. When you start getting these really, really big, huge websites that have hundreds of pages, you can look at the different flows of users. What are the most commonly followed paths? What pages on your overall website get the most hits? All right. I went through this I go through this type of stuff all the time with people. They want to take and they want to focus on a specific web page within their overall product. And I'll be like, well, how many hits do you get on that? Well, I don't know. Do you have analytics on it? Well, no. Okay, well, let's get some analytics put on it. So we put analytics on. I said, then let's let it go for 6 months, and then we'll revisit it. So you put analytics on there, you let it go for 6 months, you come back, and now that page that they're really focusing on, maybe it gets 3 hits in 6 months. Whereas another page that they thought nobody looked at is getting thousands of hits. So then you start saying, well, is it even worth having that page? For all we know, somebody accidentally stumbled onto that page that they thought was important. 3 hits in 6 months. And over here, you're not focusing on some type of a calendar or something like that. You're not placing emphasis on that, but that's what people really want to know. So what that means is, we take this page over here that means nothing to most people, and we take it away from the home page, and we put this thing that people are really wanting, and we make it more easily accessible to the users to get to. Different type of accessibility, by the way. Literally, how quickly can I get to what I want? Because that's what you want your users to be able to do. And that's what analytics can do for us, is help us analyze what do our users really want versus what we thought. Because you got to remember, It's you and a team of a couple other people, right? This is for whatever it is. It could be a website or a program or whatever you guys wind up doing. It's you and a team of 5 or 10 people. And you might have some usability people in your company if you're fortunate enough. They might be able to help you sift through some of this. You guys are going to have a little bit of background with this, right? So they might be able to help you sift through it a little bit. But ultimately, when tens of thousands of people start hitting your website, it might be completely different than what your team thought it was going to be. And we have to have a tool to help us see that. It's the only way we're going to get things to move forward. And that's where the analytics kind of starts coming into play and helping us. Charles, questions?
Yeah, so analytics is like a set of code that is written down.
So with the analytics, like if you ever decide you want to play with this, you can do it. Like when you start delving into this, you can put it on. It's a line of code that's attached to a key. You put that on every single web page in your website. Then then Google just takes over from there. Everything gets reported back. Now keep in mind, as soon as you start using Google Analytics, it's free, but you're selling something to them. You're giving them something in exchange for using their analytics, which is every single user that hits that website, they get to record as well.
So we also do the details.
Yep. They're getting the details as well as you are to be able to incorporate it into their deep learning and stuff like that.
I was back in the database. I was like reading through some topic, and I found OLAP. Is it kind of related to?
OLAP is usually with just data warehousing, where we're going to put a front end to be able to analyze a data warehouse with OLAP. It's going to be similar, except for OLAP. Typically, that's just a way to be able to visualize our stuff. Typically, it doesn't intelligently analyze. And that's what Google Analytics will do. When it sets up the dashboards, it'll intelligently give you some feedback of different things. Does that make sense?
Sure.
OLAP was one of those big buzzwords about 10 or 15 years ago, and some people still try to hold on to it real tight. It's nothing more than a tool for us whenever it comes to like visualizing our cubes and stuff like that. It's still a very valid tool. It's still very useful, don't get me wrong. It's just, it's a dumb tool. Some of them might have gotten smarter, but in general, it's kind of a dumb tool. So I want to show you what happens. You remember I told you if your server and your test environment exist in the same network, you're going to get weird errors. Let me show you the weird errors. So my server is within my testing environment. My server is right over there. So what happens is things get resolved internally. So this is what happens whenever you're on the same network with your testing and your development. And I haven't set it up, I haven't changed it. So notice how it'll still get me, this actually comes from PHP, this is a PHP call, okay? And this gives me, it's Chrome, Windows 10, desktop, right? That's a PHP construct. But what happens is down here, when I pass my IP address, that is a private IP address scheme. That's a Class A private IP address scheme. And this is why it's important for us to have an appreciation for networking. This is why you should take some networking understanding. You can look at that and immediately you see 10.x.x.x. That's a Class A private IP address scheme. That means that that's an IP address that was assigned by the university. It's not a public IP address. It's a local subnet. So that's what it resolved to. So as a result, I get a failure, and it says, hey, that's coming from a private address. So that's where over here I say capture IP address using PHP or JavaScript, and that's where I said you gotta maybe get creative. You have to find a way to send out to maybe another service that will tell me, and then I can capture that appropriately. All right? It works fine, like if you're at home, and you guys don't live together, right? So if you're at home and you're at home, and you have it set up so that you can see his server, if you test your browser on his server, it'll work fine, and vice versa. But what happens is when you're on that same network, that's the error that you will get. Okay? So there's the little caveat that you should know about moving into some of this.
So it's pretty much, I shouldn't use my own IP address.
You have to figure out a way that even if you're on a local network, how can I get my external IP address? Because this is what happens with networking basics. Terry hasn't taken any networking classes, right? Because he's in the database concentration. You have a background in computer science, so you should have taken a networking class. When we go to ask what my IP address is, if I'm internal, and the server is internal, none of that gets routed outside of the network. All of that is done internally. It's just the way networking is set up. Why go external if I can stay internal? So we then have to find a way to make sure that we ask externally what our IP address is. And that works just fine, like I said, if I'm already external, because what I'm showing you here, where it's working correctly, that's my home computer. I logged into my home computer, and that's me hitting the server here from home. You understanding? And then don't forget about this browse cap. So let me review hours, expectation hours on this. I would expect for you to be able to, because you already have PHP, basic understanding of PHP and MySQL at this point. Remember, that's not what we're focused on now. We're focused on the IP address. You already have the basic infrastructure set up. It's working. With the PHP, you know how to stuff stuff into a table. You know how to create a table, put stuff into the table, right?
Yes, sir.
So now we're focused on the APIs.
Yes.
I want to read a little bit of documentation. I want to begin to understand the power of APIs. So there's somebody in the class, I think it was Shri, I can't remember who it was, that she said, hey, could I do a weather app? And I said, yeah, you could do a weather app, but you need to be able to find an API that's going to allow you to be able to pull that in, and then what are you going to do with it? This was for her Android application. So I went in, and I typed in weather API, I think free. All right. Now, OpenWeather was one of the ones that I came up with. And with OpenWeather, you can come in here and you click on API documentation, and it'll tell you when you make an API call what you're going to get and what you need to send. All right, and there everything is. That's how you're going to send it, and this is what you're going to get back. And then you need to read whatever you're getting back appropriately. I think I found another one out there. For example, Weather Underground. So it looks like Yahoo's Weather still has a free API. Nope, maybe not. Weather Underground. And this is one of the drawbacks. So Weather Underground used to be free. So if you come in here and you look at Weather Underground API, it used to be free. And this is one of the drawbacks to using APIs to get your external data. All right? You got to keep an eye on the source. Weather Underground used to be free. Somebody bought it. Weather Underground is part of the Weather Company, which is the Weather Channel, an IBM business. We'll sell you access to our data now, but you don't get it free anymore. So as a developer, if you're under maintenance, right, if you have a maintenance agreement with your website or whatever, and you tie it into an external API like that, you got to keep an eye on it. You have to understand that APIs change, the information that's returned changes, and the number of calls you can make to the API might change. You might move into a paid structure. Again, it's fine and dandy with a free structure if you're only making 150 calls a minute or an hour or whatever it calls for. But if you're going to start moving into higher number of calls, you might have to pay. So as you build your website and build in access to these APIs, you have to consciously think about there may be a recurring cost involved in me using the APIs. Everything you're doing right now is free, but I gotta inject in your mind that while it may seem free, like Google Maps seems free, but what you're sacrificing is your users' data, right? That's how you're paying Google. If you're using this weather one, like you can get this, but you gotta pay for it, right? Now the same thing happens with OpenWeather. Let me go back to OpenWeather. Yes, cutie. What's that?
My head hurts.
Okay, well, why don't you take a break from your iPad for a few minutes?
Oh,
Okay, well, why don't you get down here and why don't you take these off and get down here and sit in another chair? You want to do that? There you go. It's probably because you're spinning around. You can sit in that chair right there. Does that work?
oh.
Here, you can sit right here. Does that work? Climb up in there and try it. So let me see. It's clear and simple. Here we go. Paid plan options. So when we get to that paid plan, right here, it's clearly going to tell me free, I get 60 calls per minute. For $40 a month, I can make 600 calls per minute. And then it goes up from there. Developer, 3,000 calls per minute. Now that seems like absorbing it, right? How's it going to make more than... There's no way my server's even going to be able to handle 200,000 calls per minute. What happens if it does? You got a lot of different considerations. If your app is so powerful and so well loved, it's making 200,000 calls per minute. But think about it. Most people don't pay attention to the weather until what? And the weather, we don't pay attention to it until what?
There's a bad focus or something?
Until there's a bad forecast. And as the bad forecast inches closer and closer,
Is it going to snow tomorrow?
it's going to snow tomorrow. I wanted to go outside and play. What time's it going to lighten yet? Refresh. Now it's not just you doing that. Everybody's doing that. So now you go from making 1,000 calls per minute to the API to tens of thousands of calls because it's scaling up. So there's all these different dynamics that come into play whenever we start looking at all of this stuff and using APIs. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a break. You gather your thoughts about any questions you might have, and we'll review kind of what else is due this week. Sound good? I got to take a 5-minute break. Liam, you want to come with me?